Today, we are really excited to have two speakers to lead us in discussion of a topic that's rapidly accelerated in the research space and even in public and media attention. And I think our speakers and their teams are part of the reason why that acceleration has happened. It's no surprise to everyone or almost everyone on this call that housing characteristics and housing type play a really important role in shaping heat risks. And our speakers today are working in different and complementary ways to understand why that happens and what we can do about it. We're going to start with Patricia Solis, I'll introduce in just a moment, and then Elise Otto will be second today. I believe that is the arrangement we agreed to. Yeah, perfect. I'm seeing some nodding. So we'll start with my friend from ASU, Patricia Solis, who's a research professor in geographical sciences and urban planning. I've had the chance to work with Patricia on a number of different projects, including some specifically related to this issue. What you might not know about Patricia, and I think this data point is outdated a little bit, Patricia, but what you might not know is that Patricia leads a crowdsourcing mapping initiative called Youth Mappers, which the ASU website says has mapped at least or approximately 1 million square kilometers of features across the globe with more than 24 million unique edits to the map. So huge effort there. And we may even hear a little bit about how those efforts are related to the topic at hand today, housing characteristics and mobile and manufactured homes in particular. So with that, Patricia, thanks for being here. Patricia is going to share a little bit of her and her team's work on this space. Take it away.
Yeah, I will talk about that a little bit. Thanks, Dave. And it's good to see some familiar names and faces. And thank you all for being here. And thanks, Anne, for inviting me. This is definitely a topic that I really care a lot about. And so I want to do this topic justice. I think I have about 15 to 20 minutes, so I don't really think I'm going to be able to cover a whole lot of territory, but I want to do it in like a story, kind of a narrative format. It's going to cover a lot of ground for a research of a lot of people. I'm not going to be able to stop and give credit to a lot of people. Some of you are in this room. I see you, Erin and Jenny, Brittany, Mary, Dave, yourself, and I'm sure a few other people. Uh, Sarah, Mary, I said you. So thank you for being a part of this journey. I'm going to gloss over a lot of things, but I think it's helpful to just kind of run the gamut. I want to kind of share how this stuff evolved. And I don't want to depict it as something that maybe it isn't that we hadn't known some of these things, but I want you to kind of come along in my discovery journey as well on how it kind of came to be the stuff that we were able to do. So feel free also to throw some thoughts in the chat, maybe some things that you all learned along the way, or maybe some questions that you have, and maybe we can get to some of those while we do that. Here, let's see if I can't make this. I'm going to call them, let's see. Can you see that? Does that look all right to you? Okay. I'm going to call them innovations because I do think that there were some new things that we did along the way. And I don't think innovations are always about technology, but we did do some of those new things. And basically, this is really about solving needs. And I think that's what innovations always try to do. And I will talk a little bit about youth mappers. But like you, what we were trying to do was move this big needle. I came to Arizona in 2018, and it was specifically to start the Knowledge Exchange for Resilience. That's the boundary organization, like we call it, at Arizona State University. By the way, I counted them up the other day. There's 168 researchers at ASU that do something with heat research across 42 distinct topics. So there are an awful lot of us. And we all are trying to move the needle in our own ways. And I was a little confounded. How is little me going to try to do this and start this knowledge exchange for resilience and try to work within this space with some really wonderful researchers here and try to make a difference? And what are those factors really? There has been a lot of tremendous research gone on before here to try to do that. And so, but the knowledge exchange was really trying to take seriously this idea that the university is this space to exchange knowledge with the community, not being always the ones that have all the knowledge to impart. So that was really taking it double down, taking that seriously. So asking our community members, what is the needle we want to move? And really loudly we heard it was preventing the death, the heat associated deaths. That was really the first things that they wanted to do. And how could we limit you move our limited resources more effectively? So that was the things that we heard first and foremost. So that's the mission that we had to do. Although there were many things, I guess, that you could do along the way. So how were we going to do that? There was a lot of partnerships that came to us to the Knowledge Exchange for resilience. So one of those was the Utility Assistance Network. There were about 80 different organizations. These are the overlapping boundaries of those organizations that were providing utility assistance. There are a lot of them. Community action organizations. This is what they look like thrown up on the map. They don't all act, in the same. They do act in some of the same spaces. They do cover much of the territory, but they do overlap, right? This is kind of the idea. This is what they look like when we first got here. And I was able to convince them to kind of tell me where they were working, right? So here it is, Maricopa County, kind of a depiction, and say, where were you providing the assistance? Because what are you doing to help fight heat-associated deaths? What are you doing? And so they did give me their data. So what is the solution and where are we doing it? Okay, so let's depict this is where people live. This is sort of a depiction dot distribution map of where people, what is a geographer going to do, right? Throw up where people live in Maricopa County. And among those, these were the people that our constituents were helping. These are the people who were receiving utility assistance among those residents, right? So presumably, these are the people who needed the assistance the most. They were receiving LIHEAP dollars to help them with those utility bills. And that was over a time period of about 10 years between, the 10 years up until 2018. And then I asked Aaron's on the line here, can you help me with where are the heat associated deaths? So we're indoors, right? Those were the people who presumably were getting that utility assistance. And of course, these dots these are representation because he did provide it to me responsibly in zip code level data, but using dot distributions, this is a representation of where those would have been for those previous 8 years as well. So let's just throw that up there so we can get kind of like a bird's eye view of where that was. Where is the problem? Where are the solutions being applied? And let's just get kind of an idea, situational analysis. And then you can see there is something going on here. I don't know if you see it. I'll help you see it. Where is the problem and where is the solution and where is the gap between the problem and the solution? Over here in this blue box, right? Do you see that as well? There's an area of the city where people are experiencing heat-associated deaths, but they're not getting as much of the solution. And we were in the decision theater looking at this, and everyone thought, well, what is going on? Maybe we didn't give you some of the data. So what was happening there? Nobody could answer my question the day that we were looking at this. But the next day, I'm driving down the road because I'm new to town, right? Relatively new. I've just been here a few months. I'm driving down the road, and I am a little bit of a nerd. I use satellite imagery when I'm driving on Google Maps. And I saw this splotch on the satellite imagery as I was driving, and I go, what is that? You see it too, right? The splotch on the map. And it's this white area that was right in that blue box. And I had to zoom in to see it better. I'm like, what is that? What is that? Of course, you know the end of the story. These are mobile home parks where there are not as many trees as there are in other parts of the city, and the housing is much denser. The roofs are not as insulated. They're white. And this tells us a troubling factor that to find out, yes, people who live in mobile manufactured housing, they were left out of some of these solutions. I really wanted to go back to the lab and I said, well, let's see if we can find this in the data. Let's go back. How could this be that we are seeing this pattern? Can we see it in the data? And which of those socioeconomic demographic variables can we identify from among the census data, spatially, right, as significant? And heat illness, heat death. Fortunately, we have a lot of really great people here in the lab. We did all the right things. Um, you know, those of you who are data nerds, you know, of course, the first thing I'm going to do is OLS, see if we can't find among them the uh, people living in mobile manufactured housing. We ran that. And of course, we have multi-scale geographically related regression. We ran those as well, which is state of the art spatial analysis to see if we can't do that. And of course, publish on that. And to try to find at different scales, what were those factors and whether they were statistically significant. Of course, we did confirm some of the things that we knew, that people who were elderly and people who were income disadvantaged absolutely are definitely, you're going to find them to be among those who were suffering heat-associated illness and death. But it really did not give us a whole lot of new insights that we did not know, but we really did not explain what we saw about the mobile homes. It was falling out. And this has something to do with the scale of the data. And those of you who are spatial analysts will not be surprised by this because census data is aggregated and it was not going to come out. And this is why I think that some of this is missed in some of the types of analysis that we do. But I was not convinced. This is a blind spot. This is a blind spot in the way that we collect data and we analyze data, but we really needed to figure out why were we seeing this and in the other kinds of anecdotal data that we had, right? And why was it that, for example, in our field work and in the epidemiological data, we really did in our instinctively in our practices that we were seeing these kinds of information. And so I won't belabor the types of methodologies that we use, what we call engaged research, but we wanted to get out into the field. I work with the people who lived in mobile manufactured housing and really understand the types of exposure that they had, do community geography, if you will, and worked with a lot of students. We were able to get Schmidt Futures Fund. Dave and I worked on this together. We did look at other types of data. We did realize that about 5% of our housing in Maricopa County is in this type of housing, mobile manufactured housing, but in the data when we could get it disaggregated from the Maricopa County Public Health Department, and Aaron Gettle provided that to us in disaggregated form. About year to year, it could range. Obviously, it varies and fluctuates. Indoor heat-associated deaths could go anywhere between, 25% to almost 40% in some years. In 2019, it was almost 40% of the indoor heat-associated deaths were showing up among this type of housing. And so people in these communities were almost twice as likely not to be able to pay for electricity for various types of reasons. You would see demographically in some neighborhoods, a lot of elderly, and 30% of mobile home residents here could also have a household income of less than $25,000 per year, which is much more extreme than some of the averages that you would see in the county as a whole. Mobile home residents who perished were twice as likely not even to have AC present, and those who were 3 times more likely not to have the electricity even turned on, presumably due to the costs. And so there were these confounding factors when you're looking at risk upon risk upon risk, right? Age, type of housing, income levels. And these were the type of factors that you could see, which was leading to those kinds of outcomes that we were seeing in the public health. Now, I want to take a moment. Some of you might already understand this. Well, when I say mobile manufactured housing, it's a huge range, obviously. This can be anything from a pre-1970, which we really actually call mobile homes, which are, some of the older ones that you really think of the typical. Sometimes they are called trailers because they do have that hitch, and they are much more likely not to have the types of um, uh, um, protections from heat. And those are the ones we're most worried about. After 1990, there was a lot more efficiency standards. Sometimes this encapsulates even the RVs. Sometimes these are in the same lots. They're all put in together. Most of the time, you will see ownership of the trailers and the rents in the same spaces. People can own their own home and then rent the lot. So there's this really mixed kind of tenure. So this is going to be a really confusing space. So please don't make a whole lot of assumptions. This is a lot of complicated research when we talk about this. There's a lot of stigma associated with this. There are some parks that might be all elderly, some parks that might be made up of all families. There might be some parks where you might find people who come from many different countries, for example, or you might not find very many English speakers, and a lot of vulnerability in that sense. So there is a lot of variability when you talk about the demographics of any one particular neighborhood. So I would just encourage you when we're talking about that not to have any of one particular bias of what kind of demographics, because there is a whole lot of diversity when we say this. So, but one thing is for sure that, and then there also is a lot of really brand new manufactured housing, people who pay quite a good dollar to live in a very nicely new built home that actually is quite affordable. But one thing is for sure that they are specially legally, excuse me, go forward here. They are special legally governed under a different kind of dwelling as a single family home. And they're generally not considered personal property. They are considered personal property and not real property. And so we do have to treat them differently when we're talking about how to deal with them. I'm having trouble getting these to go forward here. Okay, so when you're looking at them on the map, oftentimes we can't even hardly see them because they're actually maybe not even visible because they're usually in a space that is considered private property, at least in Maricopa County for sure. And so we had to put these dwellings on the map to be able to even understand where they were. That I did with the help of youth mappers, and Dave mentioned that to you. Our youth mappers is a chapter of mappers, and I started this group about 10 years ago, even before I came to ASU, and we put people on the map all over the world. There are about 420 chapters in 80 countries now. And our youth mappers at ASU, we're a group of about 60 students, and we would like to make invisible people visible. And they helped us out with this project, especially. And we mapped about 3,000 building features in the first year just to try to help understand and get a handle on this, because first, to understand a problem, you need to know where it was. That was one of the main things that we did. We also tried to get AI building footprints, which was just a way to go look at the satellite imagery and collect those polygons so that we could just count up. These populations can also, since some of them are mobile, some of them are not mobile, we needed to get sort of a count of those features and then overlay the tax parcel records so we could have a really good inventory of what we were talking about and the communities we were talking about. We used a tool called MapSwipe, which is run by the American Red Cross. We normally use this stuff internationally with international humanitarian work that I work with around the world. This was used for the very first time in Arizona, the very first time in the United States in Arizona, where we put communities on the map. And it's a way to look through a ton of remote sensing data because Arizona is quite large. There's a lot of imagery to go through. And it's kind of like, think of dating a remote sensing imagery. So you kind of look at the imagery and you go, yep, there's a mobile home there. Nope, there's not. Yes, no, and map type, swipe and tap if it's there. And I enlisted our youth mappers from all over the world. So our youth mappers from Uganda and Bangladesh and Rwanda and South Africa and Brazil and all over the world helped us try to crowdsource all of Arizona to see if we could find everybody. And we sure did, because we used almost more than 1,000 mappers worldwide to crowdsource more than 2 million tiles to get it done. There were 11,000 households missing from the maps of Arizona that we found that now are on the map in the data set, that now can be part of some of the solution sets, like some of the LIHEAP records that wouldn't otherwise have been there, thanks to the work of our youth mappers, and now they're in our data sets. So that also became part of our research records. We need those so that we could do sampling. This is one example of the types of work that we do. We took 2 different neighborhoods in Phoenix, and so we could do some comparative work. We actually took records. This is a really innovative way to do work, but we took records of where students lived, and we enlisted volunteers in those areas because it's really hard to get in parks. And those students in the areas helped us enlist where people lived so that we could actually record what the temperatures were in those neighborhoods. And this is just an example of how we were able to do that. It might surprise you to see that we recorded up to 111 degrees of maximum indoor temperature of one participant, so that we could actually just get in there and have some actual temperatures from where that was. Mary, you remember this work. We did the cluster analysis of all those records so we could actually see if machine learning could tell us what was the difference between mobile homes and regular single family homes, because we had to find a way if we could prove that there was a difference between this type of housing and other types of housing, if there was a different temperature signature. And indeed, there really was. We matched these to the surveys of what people said that they were experiencing in the homes. I'm just kind of glossing over what some of this was. So we had different kinds of personas of what people were experiencing, and we could really match this and what their experiences with getting that kind of help with the systems, like the LIHEAP dollars and the utility systems. And this was really important for us to showcase the falling out of people who live in mobile manufactured housing and the help systems. We actually did fly drones over these parks as well, but I don't know how helpful this was because our drone kind of burnt up in the middle of it. You can see that I only got half of this park, but this does, I guess, at least show here in the blue. This is not what you want to see. They're basically cooling the entire area above their roof. That's terrible. You don't want to see blue like this. That means, it's not really very efficient. So I guess we got enough information to show that this is really not an efficient way of cooling homes. So we were able to really, I guess in the first part of these years, we were able to really do a very good job of documenting the problem, showing how difficult it was for the communities there. It was very difficult to get the data that we need. We did a lot of promoting awareness of these challenges. We publicized this quite a lot in national outlets, and even did a documentary of this if you're interested in seeing this. I'm going to start going really fast because I want to make sure and get to some of the solutions just so that you are aware of what those solutions were. This is really just a large body of work, and I'm really happy to share any of this with those of you who would like to see some of what has come out of that work. But once the problem hadn't been made visible, we really wanted to make sure and promote those solutions. And a lot of this would come back and make sure it came back to the community. And they were the ones that we worked with, especially with the AMHO, which is the Arizona Association of Mobile Home Owners, where we worked with them to compile and publicize these solutions. And we published, there's, I think, 4 different printings of this solutions guide, a heat mitigation solutions guide for mobile homes. And every time we would give them another box of these, they would distribute it throughout the state. And you know, I'm still out of them. I need to print another guide. They were really wonderful about getting this out everywhere. Solutions at different scales. Those for the homeowners themselves to put in place. Some of these might look familiar to you, but also solutions for the landlords to put in place. This is really important. Solutions at many different scales. Solutions for the cities. Obviously, the cities are already putting a lot of these things in place, but this was a good inventory of the kinds of things that they are doing, and a good inventory for the states and the regions. These are wish lists as well as things that people were already doing. This is a great exercise because as we were doing this, we were already compiling something that I think you're all very familiar with, the heat preparedness plan for the state, because this was a good practice run for what we decided we needed to do from here. Some of this included some serendipitous thing. I see Brittany is on here. You know, things that we put in our back pocket that we then were able to publish when things happened, like the power outages. And SRP and APS actually came forward with putting out and having landlords put in, you see there really a linchpin, having landlords put in plans for when power outages come out. And then what I think was a really great example of when research is done right, a state law was passed that prohibits landlords from telling people that they cannot install cooling technologies when they have them. Because we heard that landlords were telling them that they couldn't do all these things when they had those solutions in their hand. I'm going to gloss over a couple things because I know that we are actually running short on time. Just to say that there still is a lot of work to do, but we are taking these kinds of things to the national level, making sure that our leaders at you know, the federal agencies are aware of this. I worked with the Census Bureau to make sure all of this research is known to them. They released a national data product called the Community Resilience Estimates for Heat that takes this data and makes it available for the whole country. And that we turned back into data for the state and was adopted as the SVI by the State Department of Health for distribution of resources. And in turn, when the executive order came down from the governor's office to develop a state heat plan, we made sure the extreme heat preparedness report had recommendations for mobile home owners. Everything that we learned from that whole process was in the extreme heat preparedness plan that came out as well. And you better bet that when we worked with the Federation of American Scientists at a national level and went to the White House, I can give you the link to that. That includes everything we learned about mobile home and heat. So thank you to everybody who is part of all this work. I'm very happy to share a lot of details with anybody who would like to see details.
Fantastic, Patricia. Thanks so much. And yeah, nice to see the full life cycle there. You know, so much work, and I actually don't know that I've had the chance to sort of see the full story told top to bottom in one sitting, and you do it so well. So thank you. To keep up the momentum, I'll propose that we move right into Elise's presentation. Then we'll have some questions for both, and you know, maybe we'll have a little time for some interplay between the two. I am proud and I'm going to continue to advocate that this is a great forum to showcase the work of students and graduate students working in this space. And this month we had a chance to welcome Elise Otto, who's a PhD student at the University of Arizona, working in the same general topic area. Well, at least that's my observation. We'll see what Elise says. Elise has also worked on community mapping efforts, but what you might not know about her is that she's also worked as a river guide, including in Idaho and on the Grand Canyon. Very, very adventurous, Elise. So maybe we'll hear a little bit about that, but I think what we're going to hear the most of is your groundbreaking work on mobile and manufactured homes and heat. So Elise, please take it away.
Thanks. Thanks for the great introduction. And it was so nice to hear Patricia talk. Patricia's work is really inspirational to me. My name's Elise Otto. I'm a graduate student at the University of Arizona. I work for Mark Kier. And what I'm going to try and do for this presentation is kind of give a brief overview of our lab's research group's work, and then do a deeper dive into some of the temperature data that we've collected during the summer of 2024 in both manufactured and mobile homes, and then in public housing here in Tucson. And then I'm going to end by kind of talking about how we plan to kind of combine some of those qualitative and quantitative methods into hopefully what is some insightful research that can contribute to heat policy here in Arizona. So first of all, this is kind of not work that I do by myself at all. Mark has several graduate students, one of them, Karina Martinez, now works for the city of Tucson in the upper right-hand corner. And then we've also used heat mapper interns for the last few years. And so I'm just very grateful to all the work that people have contributed to this project. There's two kind of main projects that we work on. One, the DOE Southwest IFL funded home thermal security project, where we're examining home thermal security, which I'll talk about in a minute, within the home using temperature monitoring, interviews, surveys, and then kind of these long-term relationships with residents. So like we report back the data to them, we offer them help with applying for weatherization assistance. And then also the HUD Archers project, which focuses more explicitly on access to liquidity and the relationship to climate risk in regards to access to reliable and safe financing. Sorry, these admits are. So the basic research framework for this project focuses around home thermal security, which on the most basic level is the ability to control the temperature inside one's home. And so at the beginning of this presentation, I did notice there's a lot of college professors in the room, which was a bit of a surprise to me. So I thought you might want a more detailed slide, but basically, if people are able to keep their home consistent, safe, health, and meet their social and financial needs in regards to the temperature and the thermal environment, humidity, all of those factors. And that home thermal security is affected by a lot of different processes. So like if the home is too hot or too cold, has to do with a lot of things that people in this room already know about, finances, cooling technology, property ownership, weather, government programs and services. Also, kind of what's not in this side is this explicit distinction between being comfortable and being safe. So there's kind of a division within our work where some people are striving towards comfort and some people are really just trying to keep their home safe. And I think that's an important distinction. So in the summer of 2024, we examined home thermal security in different types of housing. And as Patricia's already mentioned, manufactured housing is a well-known place of thermal risk. There's an inordinate amount of deaths in manufactured homes in Arizona related to heat. And then based on the recommendations of the city of Tucson, we also did some monitoring in public housing. In addition to these two groups, we also did some work in kind of low-cost apartments and some duplexes and other types, but I'm going to mostly focus on these two types of housing because they have the largest sample sizes. Now, Patricia kind of already covered this, But manufactured homes, if you don't already know, is a home built on a steel chassis and then transported to a location. Many of the homes are in parks. And so that's where somebody else owns the land, and then the home occupier either owns or rents the home. And most of our research happens in manufactured home parks. Um, Manufactured homes are disproportionately exposed to hazards and often have little access to credit, so they aren't able to borrow against their home as easily as in a traditional stick-built family home. So we used kind of a mixed methods approach focused on quantitative temperature monitoring and qualitative interviews and surveys to both get data on the actual temperature on people's homes, and then what factors might be contributing to their home thermal security. These are the preliminary results that are focused on the mean temperatures in different housing types. And so really focus on the first two because the sample sizes in the other housing types are just like not large enough to be significant. But you can see in public housing versus, and this is mostly not completely climate controlled public housing. So where the resident isn't actually paying for their utilities, that the average temperatures in these homes are significantly lower than in manufactured homes, which is not really a huge surprise, but also this is quite an explicit difference. The red line marks 82 degrees, which is kind of a known threshold both for the city of Tucson and internationally for heat risk. And now I'm going to focus in on like a couple of homes. So as Patricia mentioned, they recorded values of up to 112 degrees in the homes that they had monitors in. And similarly, this home got up to 111 degrees and then routinely was over 105 degrees. In the gray, you can see the kind of the median for manufactured homes within the study, which is significantly different. And then, sorry, this home on the bottom is well below that median. And this home is actually in a cooperative where this person was paying significantly less monthly fees than people in traditional manufactured home parks within the study. So this is a FLIR image taken by one of the heat mapper interns across the street from the manufactured home that was monitored. And there's all sorts of reasons for that showed 112 degrees. And so the highest surface temperature outside the home is 155 degrees, as you can see on the x-axis. And you can see kind of some of what Patricia was talking about, where the walls are not necessarily and the roof are not necessarily completely heat tight. You can kind of see cold air leaking out of that, some of which might be normal, but this is a very hard environment to cool in. And then kind of the last breakdown of data I'll show you guys is up here. We have the same household as before with the high temperatures. But of the two monitors, there's a blue line that's hiding kind of behind that orange line. You're seeing that the house is the same temperature throughout the home. Versus in the bottom graph, the blue line is the outdoor temperatures, and then the other lines show temperatures in different rooms. So these people are actually shutting off part of their home in the summer in order to just cool a smaller space, which they sleep and spend most of their time in. So going forward, what we're kind of working on is combining this quantitative data with some of the survey and interview data we collected that will probably go into 3 to 4 papers focused on the liquidity and heat relationship from the HUD project, but also some stuff on heat practice or the practices of keeping your home cool. And some of the kind of ideas that I'm interested in are the competing thermal practices that people do to keep their home cool versus what they're doing to maintain their housing, to keep their landlord happy, to prevent themselves from being targeted for eviction. And some of those practices are manifesting very differently. And then secondly, and Patricia touched on this, manufactured home parks are often submetered. Uh, so people pay utilities to their landlord. And the Attorney General's office has been investigating some of these landlord practices where landlords are overcharging for utilities or where there's as many as 65 outages in just a couple of weeks. So we've been working with a couple local groups here in Tucson, to help support efforts to kind of document some of the temperature results of those practices within manufactured home parks. And this brings up this larger question of what are the practices that people have to go through to maintain utility access through a hot summer? Manufactured housing is just one of the circumstances in which people have to address that issue of energy access during the hot weather. And then lastly, some more theoretical work that focuses on property relations and heat and why the relationship between property ownership and heat risk appears to be quite finite and or quite established. And so this is a paper that kind of focuses more on legal property theory and uses manufactured housing and heat as a case study to show why strong property rights can, in some cases, limit people's ability to combat climate change within their home. And I think that's all of my presentation. So Patricia, we could have let you go longer because that was pretty quick. But I am available if anyone has any questions or wants any discussion. I'm going to try and see if I can get my camera to work again, but feel free to pipe in or I can hand it back over to you, Dave.
Yeah, thanks. No, that fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. And we really appreciate having a little time for discussion, which we often do a good job of bumping out in these calls. So thank you. Thank you. And Elise, maybe to get the discussion going, I wonder if you could expand a little bit more on the conflict you just described between efforts to keep the home cool and efforts to appease or not upset the landlord. And I can share that Julia and Michelle and I, with some others on the call, we certainly had a word of caution thrown at us as we were accelerating our engagement efforts with this community. Just this idea: be careful. You might take a step that sounds like help and could create a chain reaction that actually results in catastrophe, unintended. So can you share with us a little bit more about how often you're running into this conflict, how precarious of a situation it is, and any ideas on navigating it as a research and practice community?
Yeah, so I think that let me give you guys maybe a couple of examples. I think that people are very afraid of retaliation through eviction, for speaking up about wrong utility bills in particular. And let me give you like a couple of examples. So like one interview participant doesn't have gas at their house, but received a $1,200 gas bill. Many manufactured home parks use an app to pay both your utilities and your rent. And you can't pay your rent without paying your utilities within those apps. So I hear stories about like women like basically camping outside the park manager's door with a check being like, my utility bill is wrong. I want to pay my rent. I'm trying to pay my rent. And they can't without paying that utility bill. So this woman with this $1,200 gas bill, she was really dedicated to maintaining a good relationship with her landlord, but also couldn't pay the bill. And so she was like, I'm so sorry, I have to take you to small claims court. Like she didn't want to get evicted because, she owns the home that she's living in. And if she gets evicted, she also loses like this asset, whether it's worth any money outside in its exchange value to her, it's this incredible asset. And so she went to small claims court. The utility bill was found to be incorrect. But by then she had accrued enough late fees on her rent because she was unable to pay her rent without paying her utilities that that she ended up paying more. The judge required her to pay the late fees, and she ended up paying more in late fees than she would have paid for that gas bill. Um, and so this is like a whole set of actions, right, where she's managing this relationship with her landlord to avoid getting evicted while trying to financially dig herself out of this hole. And so you can see like how very quickly like extreme heat becomes not the primary concern. I think that it becomes very hard for people to complain. And in some ways, I found as like maybe a young woman walking around a young white woman walking around manufactured homes, where if the interview is a safe and private like environment, then people could kind of voice some of those complaints and those complaints could be heard. And then what we did is kind of like compile all the interview results. And then last spring, I went and did report backs with research participants who wanted to do them. And so I was able to kind of steer some people towards options that they could make a complaint that might feel safe away from their landlord. I brought, like for some people, I was like, I have an attorney general complaint form. This is a complaint form that's, like make the structure makes it a little harder for them to retaliate against you. But I don't think anyone in my study, I don't think retaliation for participating in the research necessarily was quite such a concern. But I could see how that could be a concern in other environments. But I do think that like the Landlord and Tenant Act for manufactured homes and the small claims court process is not sufficient for protecting residents of manufactured homes. That's why the consumer fraud complaints from the Attorney General's office that have started happening are so important. They're really creating a new outlet for people to make complaints and then feel like they have like some protection from retaliation through eviction. Does that answer your question, Dave, or does that just create?
I think I asked an unanswerable question,
Yeah.
and you answered. So great. Yeah, thank you, and yeah, clearly, I see. Ann sent a suggestion that this topic has so much to it. Maybe we continue it at our next month meeting as well. Yeah, because it feels like in some ways we heard such rich presentations from both of you. In some ways, it still feels like we're just scratching the surface. I have a lot more to learn from both.
And Dave, I don't know if we actually set the overall picture stage. Maybe we did and didn't, but out of all the, vulnerabilities, out of all the indoor heat associated deaths, this is the housing type that has the largest vulnerability. So if you wanted to, I say a lot, if you want to move the needle on the heat issue, solve the housing problem, because you've got the outdoor housing problem, you have people experiencing homelessness, and the indoor heat housing problem, you've got housing insecurity. So the heat problem is very much, and I do know you mentioned this when you in your introduction, housing is inextricably tied to the heat issue.
Thanks, Patricia. Patricia has a question in the chat, but I wanted to see if anyone who we haven't heard from on the call yet wanted to ask a question in our remaining 5 minutes or so.
Yeah, so Dave, this is Dave Sklar. I just question about, we haven't talked about the issue of, methamphetamine, drugs also associated with the problems with heat deaths. And so I wonder if you could just say a word about the interaction between people who live in substandard housing and also use of certain substances. And, is there something that we need to do about, both of those together in some way?
Great question, Dr. Sklar. Thank you. Elise, maybe we can go to you first. Are you seeing much in the way of overlap and intersection between those two really important risk factors?
Within this study, I haven't seen it to the extent that I imagine it probably exists. And I think that might have some to do with how we recruited participants. But I will say this, as I did see a lot of people who were experiencing heat risk, who weren't using drugs. And then I did have a couple of people in the study who were recovering from drug addiction. And yeah, I don't know if I really have time to like go into the complexity of that, of like what they had to say about the issue, but I think that there's probably people who in this room who know a lot more about that particular vulnerability than I do.
My take on that for this particular subset, for people who live in mobile manufactured housing, the subset of that subset is elderly.
Yeah.
I don't associate that with all my years of working with this community. I don't associate that subset with this subset. The drug problem in this one is keeping the drugs cool when the power outage goes out and finding a refrigerator for them. That's the drug problem that I've seen.
Yeah.
To be quite honest with you.
Aaron from the health department is on. Aaron, just sort of off the top of your head, what's your sense of the overlap in? I don't even know if mobile home and substance cases.
Yeah, I would agree with Patricia that it's mostly the overlap is more in the older age group, if we were to subset more than the substance use group. I do have a question for Elise or Patricia.
Yeah, we pass the baton to you, so yeah, you definitely get the rights.
We here we can only see data that's reported to us, so we're not really out observing what's happening in the communities. What are the residents of these communities using to cool their structures? What? Yeah, I guess how are they cooling them?
Patricia, do you want to go first, or you want me to go first?
Well, I have a book on that I've printed a few times. Well, there's all sorts of, and there's some things that they do that we couldn't put in the book because we wanted to be responsible and not promote things that they shouldn't be doing. There's all sorts of homemade stuff, but there's a Home Depot, mobile Home Depot out in Mesa. That's very frequented, where they go, you can buy things that you put in the windows. That's very, very common. They spray stuff. They're so experimental. Very, very common is to just rig something to put over your air conditioning unit, because if you can keep the shade over the AC unit, that helps make that run better. That's super, super common. Shade, skirts for sure. They'll rig anything. Cardboard.
Yeah, covering windows, blankets to keep out part of the house, mopping the floor repeatedly throughout the day so that the evaporation cools everything down, sticking your head in a refrigerator, sticking your shirt in a refrigerator or a freezer, and then taking it out, eating popsicles, ice cubes, little
personal behavior.
Yeah.
Behavior, like going in the bedroom in the morning when the sun is there, and then turning the air conditioning off though, and then going in the other room, like moving through the day. Personal behavior.
And just trying to make a window air conditioner work that doesn't work any longer. Chirpas, which is a weatherization assistance organization, has a more holistic perspective on this, but I also see some people who have really well cared for evaporative coolers who are doing really well. And so I think that's kind of an interesting perception. I also have someone in the study right now whose temperature chart you just saw, who has a brand new window air conditioning from a weatherization assistance program, and she won't turn it on because she's worried that her utility bill would be too high. So, what would have been a better solution for her? Yeah, I mean, I can send you some pictures too if you want to see. I try to take a lot of pictures of window AC, of kind of some of these methods. I'm happy to share some of those. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just curious because I know there's just lots of hurdles for these individuals to get assistance just because of the type of housing they're in, just kind of sometimes they're in unincorporated areas. So I was just curious, I don't know, if just ways that people were keeping cool, and if there were more, I guess, sound ways or things we could recommend when giving presentations.
Unfortunately, Aaron, some of the ways that they're keeping, well, I don't know. There's some of the things that they're doing are things that they're not keeping cool. Like is like they're turning off the AC because they aren't going to be able to afford it. That's the part that I'm worried about. It's not so much when they are creative and finding ways to keep cool, that's great. But the parts that I'm worried about is when they do know what they need to do, but they just don't do it because they can't afford to do it. Those are the parts that that's the parts I'm worried about.
Yeah, I think
I mean,
people feel a lot of shame too that they aren't able to cool their home, and that sometimes is a big uh reason why they aren't interested in leaving their home to get cool.
or they just say, I'll be fine tonight.
Yeah.
I'll be okay for tonight. And then that's not okay. That just that time. That's the part that's when it becomes dangerous because they just decide that it's just going to be okay for tonight. That's when you read those stories.
Yeah, and I mean, like a lot of these people are people who work their whole lives and were really proud of their job, and so it's like I think like there's that I think a lot of people are still kind of in shock that they're in this situation where they have to choose between being able to pay their utility bill um and like turning off their air conditioning and being able to keep their housing.